Hi, everybody. Welcome to Oh the Humanities. I'm Mr. Mello, and I just want to thank everybody for helping us reach 200 subscribers. It's awesome to hit this milestone, and I'm glad you've been enjoying the content I've put out so far. So, we're releasing a special episode today that's something completely different. The other day, I tried making a Twitch stream for the first time, and it was fun. So what it is a literary tier list of me ranking some of the most widely taught books in schools. These are just kind of my off-the-cuff opinions. If you disagree, feel free to let me know, or even make your own videos about these books too. I can't wait to hear what you think as well, and I hope you enjoy me just rambling about books a bunch. If you like this kind of content, want me to make more Twitch streams in the future, let me know. I'm happy to do it. Or if you ever have any kind of content that you want to see more of from the channel, let me know. I'm always looking for topic suggestions. So again, thanks for 200 subscribers. I hope you enjoy this video. It's pretty different from the normal stuff, and have a great day. Enjoy the video. Bye. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Oh the Humanities, your home for language arts, social studies, and humanity, where we are taking a quick break from my usual YouTube videos that feature lessons on reading, writing, and so much more. We've made a lot of those lately, and I just thought that this cold, wintry, snowy Sunday afternoon would be a perfect time to try something completely different where we can just chill out and vibe a little bit. So we are going to make a tier list today. I have compiled 25 of some of the most taught books in English classes, and we are going to rank them today. Now, of course, this is all just in good fun, and the opinions I have of these books are entirely my own, of course. But we've got our nice hot cup of coffee, and we are just going to have some fun talking about books today. Now, a few rules of how I got these books together. Well, first off, I'm not including any plays or poetry in these, so Shakespeare, my man, Billy Shakes, he deserves his very own video, so he will not be represented here, or else we'd just be talking about Julius Caesar and Macbeth and Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet and Midsummer Night's Dream the whole time. I also got rid of poetry for this, so no Odyssey or anything like this. I have also, you're going to notice that there are some books mysteriously missing here, because I've decided to exclude any book that I have not actually read before. And there is going to be a future video planned of the top 10 books that it is very shocking and surprising that I haven't read. And when I issue that video, there will be a subscriber challenge. If we can get up to a certain number, then I will read and review all of those books that I really need to read. Now, sometimes in here, because this is my very first Twitch stream, and I'm not entirely sure how it's all working, I'm going to be clicking back and forth and checking this. Now I see we actually have 0 viewers right now. But just in case some viewers come, now there are 2 viewers. But so you'll see my infinite loop whenever I go here to check the chat. I'm sure there's a better way to get that integrated. Actually, I bet if I just pull that out. Nah, you know what? We're just gonna do it live today. And we're just going to hop back and forth every once in a while to check the chat. But here we go. Shall we get started? Once again, can't reiterate enough. These are just my opinions on these books, some of which I have not read for a very, very long time. So if I reread them, or even just did this on a different day, we might get different rankings, but let's go ahead and start. First off, we've got a big old classic. We've got 1984, one of the most talked about books by people who haven't read it. That's a meme that's been floating around Twitter lately, but you know, me, I personally love dystopian books. So I've got to put this, we're going to start off strong in the A tier. Now, it's not S tier because I do think that there are some flaws with this book that actually I can talk about. We're going to do all our dystopias right off the bat because Brave New World, also an A tier. Fahrenheit 451, I want to put it in S, but I want to talk about all three of these books together, and I'm putting them all in the A tier because 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451, I think they're like the classic trifecta of dystopian literature. Like, we would not have that as a genre in the same way that we do without these three books. But the thing is, they all really paint like different pictures of what the future or now the present could look like. And I think they all get some parts correct, like 1984 with surveillance, Fahrenheit 451 with people being media obsessed and going away from reading books, which, I mean, we're trying to prove Ray wrong by talking about all these books today. And, of course, Brave New World, which doesn't get talked about as much as these, but honestly, guys, read it because it's awesome. I'm going to actually rank these, so Fahrenheit's my favorite. Love Bradbury. His prose is like butter. His prose is like poetry, honestly, so it's just a nice read. 1984, awesome, classic, read it. Brave New World, though, doesn't get discussed as much because it's maybe not as great as these two, but it's got some awesome stuff and some nice little accurate predictions in there as well. But why am I not putting these in S tier? Well, that's because these three books, to me, all have the same fatal flaw. That's right. They're all flawed because I think each of them have a gripping, action-packed story. And when you're writing a novel, you want the meaning and the themes to come through the actions and come through that character development. And you should be able to take away the meaning of the book just by reading it. But all three of these, at the very end, instead of coming to some action-packed climax, all of them, literally all three, have the protagonist just sit down with a character. In Fahrenheit 451, it's the guy out by the train tracks. 1984, it's O'Brien. Brave New World, it's that like guy who tells him about Shakespeare and sits him down in his office. And you see how long it's been since I've read these because I forget their names right now. But they just have somebody just sit there and explain the book to them. And they just tell you exactly what the book means and what you should take away from it. So they're not trusting their readers 100% in these dystopian books. All three of these classics have a shockingly similar scene at the end where a character just tells the protagonist all about the world and the meaning behind it and how things happen and all of that. 451 Beatty does that a bit too, but more so the old man at the end. Okay, let's see where we are in our chat. Nothing so far, but we got 3 viewers, so what's up, guys? Thanks for talking about books with me here. Okay, now let's go to our next. Well, actually, no. Let's bring The Giver in here, because The Giver does not do that thing. The Giver has the character actually escape the future world, and they do action-packed stuff, and it's great. So, do I put that in S? No, of course not. I can't put The Giver above all of these three. I have to go down a little bit. The Giver is awesome, though, and that scene where, like, the character Gabe? I think it's Gabe. You can tell me in chat if I'm wrong about that. Help me out. Help me know what the characters' names are. But Gabe, I mean, when he first sees color and he's taking on all these like thoughts and feelings of the society, it's really cool. There's almost like a mystical or magical element to it that we don't see in the more realistic stuff up here. But these A tiers like have a depth and exploration of their future societies that I think is just not on par with what we get in The Giver. And I'm not knocking Lois Lowry at all. This is an awesome book, but I would still put it on a tier below the classic trifecta. That's where my dystopians are gonna land. But at least it doesn't have the same fatal flaw. But it just doesn't develop them as well as these guys. Now we are going to get to All Quiet on the Western Front. Now this is a book that I have not read in a long time. This is a World War I book written by a former German soldier. So you really see like the horrors of that war, especially. And World War I is terrifying. World War II, I feel like, gets the most of our attention within culture. I think there was more written and especially like more movies and things made about World War II. But I really like World War I literature because when you got to the 1900s, there was this great kind of hope regarding like modern society and the technical innovations, but then you saw all of these people in World War I go into this horrifying war where for the first time we had heavy artillery and chemical weapons and things being used and trench warfare that was just terrifying, and it really like led to modernism becoming huge as a genre. And I mean, I'm going to say straight up, modernism is one of my favorite genres. So you see a lot of awesome stuff. But the thing is, with All Quiet on the Western Front, I know I read this in high school, but it's been so long. I don't think that I can put this book above these. But I still think, like, as far as war novels go, it really is one of the best. And it's a classic for a reason. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. So far, all of our books have pretty high marks. But while we're talking about war novels, let's take some others from down here. We've also got A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, who I mean, obviously, Hemingway is known as a great novelist. He was kind of a jerk personally, but he was a good writer. And he did one of my favorite things. I mentioned that modernism is one of my favorite genres. And Hemingway really helped solidify that style because he applied like journalistic writing to like literature. And what that means is he basically just like decided, instead of having these long, flowing, flowery sentences that you had in the 1800s with authors we'll get to like Charles Dickens and stuff, he just kind of was like, say things as straightforward as possible, short sentences, just concise language where you're just saying what you mean and saying it in as few words as possible, which I really like. Though I think, as an extension of that, I honestly think Hemingway's better at short stories than novels, in my opinion. He's got some great short stories, but I think I'm going to put this right around All Quiet on the Western Front. They're kind of like tying for me, but we'll see if we can get more in there. Some of these might get bumped down to C. Not that they're like C novels. All of these are classics, like for a reason for the most part, but you know, we have all these tiers to work with, so we can't put everything right here. And then we have our final war novel of the list. Actually, no, there's a couple, now that I'm peeking down here. Tim O'Brien, The Things They Carry. This is about the Vietnam War, and this is an easy S tier. I'm not even going to really think about it much more than that, because that book is outstanding. I mean, there's no real if, ands, or buts about it. If you haven't read The Things They Carried, highly recommend. Good for high school, college age, or adult. But man, if we're talking about like getting into the real horrors of war that All Quiet on the Western Front did after World War I mean, this brings it to a whole other level that nowadays we can really resonate with. And then I just noticed Slaughterhouse-Five hiding out over here. This is a World War II book, but it's also a weird time traveling sci-fi adventure, and as an Indiana native, I've got to put Indianapolis's own Kurt Vonnegut also in S tier. Fun story about Slaughterhouse-Five. This was the first book I ever read in one sitting. I started it and read all through the night because I just could not put it down. It is really one of my favorite books of all time. So Slaughterhouse-Five is going all the way up there. Okay, checking on the chat. Nothing yet. So I haven't made anyone too mad with my opinions, so let's do that. Now, Catcher in the Rye. Catcher in the Rye. Where do we put you? Now, if you had asked me in high school when I read this, so The Catcher in the Rye, for those of you who don't know, this is about just an angsty teen who's really mad at everything and his parents and the world, and he's just walking around New York City just being mad about it. And I was a 10 out of 10 super angsty teen as a kid. So if you'd asked me when I was 18 years old and I first read this, I would have put it in S tier. But now, thinking back, he's honestly just kind of whiny. And Catcher in the Rye goes C tier. I'm still attached to it because I still remember that part of my life where I was a very super angsty teen. But now looking back, I think if I read it again, I would put it more in the middle here. Okay. A Diary of a Young Girl. Anne Frank. This is Anne Frank's diary, for those of us who don't know. Victim of the Holocaust, and it's one of the great personal accounts that we have of the horrors of the Holocaust. And the thing that I really love about the Diary of a Young Girl is looking back, for being, I think, 14 years old, Anne Frank was honestly like an amazing writer. And it's just a diary, you know, but it's really outstanding writing. Now, and of course this has such like cultural and historical significance, but I'm like really torn here. Like, do I love it as much as the dystopian books? Like, because as a novel, right? Because we're thinking about these as a novel, we're not really factoring in as much historical significance. This is like a tough one to rank. Because I feel like I can't just like, is it bad to put this in the top of B tier? Should I put it in the top of B tier? I think like, because on one hand, like, as historical significance, bottom of A tier. As me sitting down and like wanting to read a novel, B tier. We'll put it in the bottom of A. We'll put bottom of A. Because I still think I'd rather like read these dystopian books. Actually, controversial type. We're splitting up the trio. We're splitting up the trio just a little bit. Okay, now we've got Flowers for Algernon. C tier. Low B tier. Flowers for Algernon is cool because the way that he writes the character as like Charlie in the book develops like more intellect, and you start out with all these like grammatical and spelling mistakes, and then like as you go you get more and more complex. So this book, for those of you who don't know, I should really be giving like better recaps of these as we go through. Flowers for Algernon is about this person who is very unintelligent at the beginning of the book, but then they do experiments on him and he gets smarter and smarter as he goes through. But then at first it's really great, but then he feels distanced and like drawn apart from like everyone else in his life because like he's too smart for them. There's a great It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia episode where they called Flowers for Charlie, which is funny because the protagonist in the actual book is named Charlie too, but they just kind of do their own take on this book, and it's very good, very funny. Okay. This next one is going to make people mad, I think. It's The Great Gatsby, which, I mean, obviously a classic novel. I feel like everybody reads The Great Gatsby in high school. I've had to, like, throughout high school and college, I had to read it probably 2 or 3, maybe even 4 different times I was assigned it and studied it. And, you know, people clearly see something in this book. They really seem to like it. And I don't. I don't. It's not an F tier. I think this is a D tier book. It's not my favorite. And I mean, part of this ranking, I think, is like the fact that it's like outweighed. This is the same. Oh, this is going to make people mad too. This is the same way I feel about The Office. Like, people are obsessed with that show. And I'm like, yeah, it's funny. It's all right. But I don't see like why that of all the shows is held up as like the best thing. And that's how I feel about Great Gatsby. It's like all right, but it's for some reason the one that people always keep coming back to, and maybe I'm missing something. But to me it's like, man, our major problem in this book is that Jay Gatsby likes a girl who doesn't like her back. You got to move on, Jay. Come on, Jay Gatsby, you got to move on. Because, I mean, Daisy just doesn't like you that way. Plenty of other fish in the sea, man. You don't have to go over it. So yeah, The Great Gatsby is about this rich guy named Jay Gatsby who makes a friend, Nick Carraway, but he's in love with his cousin, with Nick's cousin. And then just like, I guess he got rich with this sole reason of trying to like impress her, but like she's already married and there's a bunch of drama that goes on with it. And I don't know, man, it is this nice portrait of like the 20s flappers and philosophers era of excess and a fun time, but I don't know, it doesn't do it for me like in the same way that I guess all of these books do. So I'm sorry, F. Scott Fitzgerald, but when we're talking about 1920s writers, Hemingway beats you out, and especially somebody who does not make this list because he's never taught, is John Dos Passos. Dos Passos is an S-tier novelist, but he's not on the list. But everybody should stop reading Hemingway, stop reading Fitzgerald, and read Dos Passos, who was like one of their contemporaries, and nobody thinks about anymore. But he's awesome. And actually, don't stop reading Hemingway and Fitzgerald. You can still read them, but also read Dos Passos. Okay, now I was afraid all of these were going to be like S and A tier books. Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad is an F tier book. Don't even have to think about it. Because, I mean, this is colonialism to a T. I mean, really, thinking about it, almost all of these books are, by white men. Some are by white women. Some are not. Some are otherwise. But if we're going to get a real, and that's, I mean, really, that's like the literary canon for you. And a lot, I mean, we could do a whole other video sometime on how excited I am about authors of color and like different gender identity and things like that, like just becoming super popular now. And there's this renaissance of awesome, great writers who are kind of going to this contrast of the literary canon, because most of what is taught in schools are like old white people, some of which are really effective and fantastic, but others of which, I mean, we could be inserting some new perspectives in here. And I think we should be, I mean, we read to learn more about the world, to find out other perspectives. So I think it's really good that the new kind of modern literary landscape includes a lot more voices compared to these older books that are most widely taught in schools. Okay, now here, Heart of Darkness, though. This is by Joseph Conrad. It's about a guy trying to go into, he's sailing down the Congo River in the African continent to retrieve this lost Colonel Kurtz. He's a colonel, right? Colonel Kurtz. We're going to call him that. I think that's his rank. But I mean, when you're, Joseph Conrad, I know it was another time, bud, but when you're writing a novel about going to the center of Africa, and you're going to call that book The Heart of Darkness, ugh, oof. That's not good, bud. That's not good. But here on the other side of things, okay, this is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This also goes right up to S tier, actually above the things they carried. This book has been actually featured in all of my videos because I have a copy right here, always just on my shelf. Is this, man, if you're talking about, oh, by the way, this is not H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man, which is about a man who turns invisible. This is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which is a great portrait of, how do we want to say it? The Black experience in America, and one of the most significant novels of its era in that regard. And it's awesome. The writing is incredible, and I'm putting it in S tier. Simple as that. Now we get to a book that I read for the first time very recently, actually. I read this finally last year, because as I just said, I'm behind on my reading. There's some gaps in my reading. This is Lord of the Flies. And much like The Great Gatsby, where it's like, hey, I'm a rich dude and I've got problems. This is a bigger problem. We are like shipwrecked and have to survive, but it's all these kids, and honestly, like, I was expecting more. I thought this was going to really deteriorate into violence. Maybe I shouldn't let like the cultural impact of it and what I thought it would be about like impact things so much, but like I thought this was going to be a lot more gruesome, a lot more violent, and like I don't want to spoil the ending, because maybe people haven't read these, even though they've been out for a long time. I know, I just read it, and I wouldn't have wanted it spoiled. I'm going to put it C tier, because I think it's better than Catcher in the Rye. It's a better problem than Catcher in the Rye, at least. Okay. Yeah, that works. Okay, Of Mice and Men. This was another one that I put off reading for a long time, but I'm glad that I finally did, because this is an A-tier book. I like Of Mice and Men. It's nice and short. It's that Hemingway vibes. Say what you want. Say it quickly. John Steinbeck, you wrote a nice novella there. I really liked it. Like Slaughterhouse-Five, this is another one that I read in one sitting because it was very good. Okay. Now we get to the part where I can't see what this is. Oh, this is Nella Larsen. Nella Larsen, Passing. Now, this one is not actually like these taught in high schools as much, but I included it on this list because when I was doing an English major in college, I had to read this in like 3 or 4 different classes who all assigned it, and it was pretty dope. I'm going to put it above Flowers for Algernon. Like Invisible Man, this is by a black author who tells about that experience of that time, which is, this case is the 20s. I think Invisible Man is later than that. At least it was written later. But Nella Larsen, the character in her book Passing is about someone who is black but can pass as white. So she's kind of living these almost dual lives where in some spaces she's considered black, some spaces she's considered white, and it's really like just explores all of that in really interesting ways. Actually, I might put this above those two. I don't like it just like as much as some of these, but it's a really good, really classic book. Especially if we're considering like African American literature classics, like, yeah, read Passing. Okay. I talked about modernism a bit before. I talked about Gatsby. Talked about Hemingway. But if we're talking about like modernism and like who the real best authors, if I don't like Fitzgerald, Hemingway's still a B. Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. This is an S tier book right here. Because James Joyce is awesome. And, there were people later on in the 50s, like Jack Kerouac, who were well regarded for, like, inventing stream of consciousness, where you just write in the style of, like, thoughts coming one after another. And people, like, hail Jack Kerouac and, like, On the Road as being, like, emblematic of that. But, man, James Joyce was doing that in, like, the 20s or 30s. And this book is just really good. As far as like writing style and innovation and being like super experimental and like just thrusting like the trajectory of literature like decades into the future, James Joyce is where it's at. And oh man, I feel like I have too many S tiers, but I mean these are classic books and some of them are, I think, widely taught for a reason. So I mean, if I'm talking about SIDDHARTHA, this is very formative for me. I think I have to put this like up towards the top here. Like, if you are curious about kind of Eastern philosophy at all, like Buddhism specifically, like SIDDHARTHA is a great place to start. Then again, I mean, I would actually recommend like maybe reading someone like from that culture instead of like a German guy writing about it. But for a German guy writing about it, he does very well. And SIDDHARTHA is just this amazing, positive book about spiritual growth and like developing oneself. And I think it's very effective. He also wrote Steppenwolf, which is also incredible. But whereas SIDDHARTHA makes me happy and hopeful, Steppenwolf makes me very, very depressed. Ooh, we've got a commenter that says Sirens of Titan is above Slaughterhouse-Five, which, like I said, there are lots of books that I have not read, and Slaughterhouse-Five is still the only book by Vonnegut that I've read, and that's on my list as well. I want to go through all of the Vonnegut books actually sometime. And then once I read all of those, we can do a tier list of just those. But yeah, I have heard that Slaughterhouse-Five is not necessarily his best book, but it's the only one I've read, and it's still like at the top of my list right now. Okay. You'll notice there's lots of 1900 stuff in here. Not very much 1800 stuff. That's where a lot of my blind spots are. Because in college, I had some really cool academic advisors who let me substitute some different classes. So instead of taking like early British lit and early American lit, where I would have read lots of stuff like Dickens and Jane Austen and all of that stuff, I got to take African American lit and a film lit class where we talked movies or watched and studied movies instead. So thank you to my professors and academic advisors back in the day. But now I have this unfortunate thing where I'm just missing lots of books. But recently I did go back and I read Tale of Two Cities, and it's definitely above these. Well, it's above Flowers for Algernon too. We're bumping Flowers for Algernon back to this. It's good, but man, he could have said that in a lot shorter, huh? It goes back to that Hemingway thing I was talking about, where he brought that journalistic sensibility, where you're just like writing kind of short, concise sentences to get your point across, which was a reaction to the 1800s Victorian literature, where it was very much like they were paid by the word and they were kind of making things as flowery and complex as possible. But I don't think you need that to tell a story. But also at the same time, whereas you had this like modernism where you're not just injecting the moral of the story into the story, like lots of these books really kind of beat you over the head with the message. I think A Tale of Two Cities, hot take, this is my hot take on Tale of Two Cities, it should have just been The Tale of One City, because all of the stuff that happens in London didn't seem that important compared to the French Revolution stuff. Okay, sorry fantasy fans, we're on to The Hobbit now, which is a C tier. Now let's put it above Catcher in the Rye. This is a C tier that I finally read last year. And, you know, I love fantasy, but while Tolkien is a great world builder, he is not that great of a writer. I'm just going to be honest. This is a fun little romp. It's got some fun moments, but I've got some criticisms of The Hobbit that I can levy. Number one problem with The Hobbit. Why does there need to be like 14 dwarves? None of which who have like any characterization. There's like one dwarf that has a personality, but then you're always constantly managing these like 15 main characters that you can't keep straight. And then as a result, none of them get any development, any character. So again, it's like this very fun world and these fun, adventurous scenarios, but I don't care about the characters, like other than Bilbo. And then I'm spoiling The Hobbit. I'm sorry. If you don't want to hear spoilers for The Hobbit, I'm about to say something that happens towards the end. Okay, you're building up this whole conflict against Smaug the dragon for the entire book. And then Bilbo Baggins is like having this conflict. He keeps sneaking in, and all the time he's used his trickery and wily ways to get himself out of these terrible situations. But then you have Smaug leave the cave, and then some random guy who we had not heard of before, who shows up like in this there's some guy who shows up, like, in the paragraph he's introduced. He just shoots Smaug with an arrow, and Smaug dies. And then the villain is done. And, like, they even went to the town where that dude was, and he wasn't even introduced when the characters were there. Like, if you'd foreshadowed it or had that character being developed, like, that would be one thing. But it's just like, sure, there's some fun adventure, and obviously, like, Middle Earth is one of the best, like, fleshed out, like, fantasy universes and lore ever, but from, like, a narrative, like, character kind of standpoint, it's not that strong, in my opinion. Again, these are all just opinions, but still. Okay, we got The Outsiders. My students are going to be surprised. I'm putting this high B tier. I'd still think I'd rank it lower than The Giver. Now, The Outsiders invented young adult literature pretty much. Like, young adult was not even a genre before The Outsiders came around. But this book, I mean, it is awesome. It's a fantastic book. But I think compared to all of these others, yeah, it's not all of these. No, I'm sorry, Steinbeck. I'm going to bring you back here. I just love these. Both of them. And I don't want them to fight. Fahrenheit 451 and 1984 can get along in my book. Books. Okay, we got The Stranger by Albert Camus. This is another one that if you asked me at a different time in my life, like when I was in college and read it and was super into absurdism and existentialism, I would have said like S tier. But I don't know, I really need to reread this one. Because I think now I would have a totally different perspective of it. But I mean, when you pretty much use your novel to invent a whole new field of philosophy, that's pretty cool. So I'll still put you in B. Because absurdism and existentialism are cool. But I don't know how well this novel keeps up. This is the one, out of all of these, I think I need to reread the most to really figure out where I would put it. Got a lot of B's. I feel like I should be meaner and get more books at the bottom tiers. Things Fall Apart's not going on the bottom tier, though. Because this is awesome. See, Heart of Darkness is at the bottom because that is a European dude writing about Africa in a really bad way. Things Fall Apart is a Nigerian writing about Nigeria. So it's much better. And you get this wonderful picture from the Nigerian perspective of colonialism. This would be higher if Okonkwo wasn't actually like kind of a jerk, though. Which makes me sad, because I want to root for him. And I feel really, really sorry for him in ways. But he is that like kind of Greek tragedy, like flawed character. He's a very flawed character. Which on one hand, especially like given our like cultural understandings now, is like it's hard to root for some of the things he does. But at the same time, the portrait of like colonialism and how that affected people there is amazing. And especially like for its time being like one of the first to do that. Definite A tier. Oh man, how long have we been streaming? Because we're to like the last one here. This is like overall shorter than I thought it would be. Should have gone 50 books. But we only went 25. Because now we have Tom Sawyer. I'm sorry, Mark Twain. You're pretty good and stuff, but I don't know why Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn are the ones that are like widely celebrated. Because he wrote some other stuff that was genuinely like really funny and awesome. But Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, like it's just some people vibing. There's not really like that much of a gripping plot to it. It's just, and I'm gonna get all the Mark Twain stans coming at me and like telling me why I'm wrong about that, which please do, because I haven't read this since like I was in 7th grade probably, so might be missing some subtext there, but in my flawed memory, like, this is where I'd put this. Okay, let's go through. Now that we've ranked all of 25 of these books and see what I've messed up on. And if you're in the chat, you can tell me what I've messed up on. But I think this is where I'd put things. Slaughterhouse-Five, Siddhartha, Invisible Man, The Things They Carried, and Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man in S tier. Yeah. Then these other ones in A tier. Okay. Should he be here? Yeah, I'm going to put James Joyce in there. James Joyce deserves it. All these in A tier. I would move this up. Let's move Things Fall Apart up. Things Fall Apart up. But again, I'm big dystopia guy. So the 2 big dystopias have to be up here. Our YA couple of books. I could do a stream on just YA books sometime. That would be fun. Passing. Yeah. Tale of Two Cities, C. The Stranger. C for now. If I reread it, that might change. Yeah. These 3, like, could almost be D if I was feeling mean, but I'm not feeling mean today. I'm feeling nice today. I think the only one on this particular list that gets F is Joseph Conrad. I'm being mean to Fitzgerald, because it is a good book. Realistically, that should be C tier probably, but I'm just going to leave it at D. Okay. Everybody, we did it. We've done it. Okay, so again, these were 25 literary classics, some of the most taught books, and me judging them. Some of these I have taught, some of these I hope to teach, some of these I would never teach. But this was a chill Sunday stream. It's nice to take the afternoon off from doing lessons and just hang out. If you guys like this, we can Twitch stream more in the future, find some other fun stuff to do in this kind of realm, because this was just a chill Sunday stream. At some point, you'll notice there are a bunch of books missing from here that you were like probably thinking, what about this one? What about that one? I'm not going to name them, but you know what they are. I'm going to do a top 10 books that I have not read before video at some point. And again, there will be a subscriber challenge. If I can get up to a certain number of subscribers, I will read and review all of those books for you. A way of subjecting myself to more work in gratitude for your support of the channel. And again, there were no Shakespeare, no poetry on here, so the Odyssey was out, Julius Caesar was out, but we could do a Shakespeare video sometime. That would be fun. Let's see. Once again, I am Mr. Mello. This was Oh the Humanities. Okay, somebody, Kaliox C, I'm not sure if I am saying that right, somebody agrees with most of the rankings, but haven't read some of them. So I've read all of these, but again, there are lots of books that I have not read that I will be making a video about sometime as well. Anytime you want to chat about books, learn more about them, or just learn more about reading, writing, and humanity, check out Oh the Humanities at youtube.com. We've passed the 10 video mark, so we're really getting somewhere now. We're getting cooking. So, thanks for tuning in today. I'm Mr. Mello. This is Oh the Humanities. Signing off.